The haftarah of the first day of Passover. If you're a rabbi a couple thousand years ago, and 2,000 years ago, and you wanted to think about what prophetic portion you should read on Passover, Joshua chapter 5 would certainly jump out at you. It tells the story of the Israelites. Joshua is obviously the first book after the Torah, and Joshua is Moses' successor. And so you have in this prophetic portion the celebration of the first Passover in the Holy Land, which is in chapter 5, starting with verse 10. Where it says they offered the Paschal sacrifice and they celebrated Passover. Before that, they had some business to take care of because evidently in the desert during the 40 years they didn't circumcise their babies. And so the first thing they had to do as free people in the new land was fulfill the mitzvah of circumcision, which they did. The Torah says that. And it says they rolled away their disgrace of Egypt. Then it goes into the idea about offering the Paschal sacrifice and celebrating Passover. It said, on that very day they ate of the produce of the country, unleavened bread and parched grain. And when they could feed themselves, they ate produce of the land, the manna ceased. No longer were they children that had to be fed by God. The Bible's saying here now they were grown-ups and they could grow their own food and be on their own. Then there's a very interesting passage which concludes the haftarah, starting with verse 13, which says, when Joshua was near Jericho, he looked up and saw a man standing before him with a drawn sword. And Joshua said, are you one of us or the enemies? He said, no, I am the captain of the Lord of hosts, and I have come. Joshua threw him down on the ground and started prostrating himself, saying, what does my Lord command his servants? The captain of the Lord of hosts says, remove your sandals from your feet, for the place where you stand is holy, and Joshua did. And this is right before the Battle of Jericho. Now, we know from archaeology that Joshua never fought the Battle of Jericho because it was destroyed way before Joshua would have been there. But when our ancestors wrote the stories down, they knew Jericho had been destroyed, and they told the story of Joshua destroying it and conquering the land. Now, if you read the book of Judges carefully, you'll see that it tells a very different story than the book of Joshua, as opposed to Joshua, which tells the story of a vast, quick, violent conquest of the land of Israel. The book of Judges shows that it was never complete domination. It was uneven. They lived side by side with their neighbors. They had ongoing battles. And even though it's the promised land for the Jews, it wasn't the way that Joshua necessarily told it. In any case, we have this magnificent story here of Joshua being alone as the leader and not sure what to do. It kind of reminds us of the Jacob story when he was going to meet his brother Esau, and he separated the camp, and he was alone, and he had that wrestling match. Here, Joshua sees a man with a drawn sword, and he wants to know if he has to fight him, if he's an enemy, or he's with us. Well, that's an interesting question, too. How could he not know, who the guy was? Obviously, the guy was important, but was it his imagination? Was it a vision? What was it? And the guy says, I am the captain of the Lord of hosts. So God has some kind of Lord of hosts, angel army. And Joshua says, what am I supposed to do here? Man says, just take off your shoes. You're standing on holy ground. And doesn't say what happens next, except that Joshua fights the Battle of Jericho in subsequent chapters and wins the first victory of the Israelites in the Promised Land. So why was this haftarah selected for the first day of Passover? Well, obviously it's because it was the first Passover celebrated by the Jews as free people, and since that day we've been celebrating the Passover an unbroken link for thousands of years. But I've heard when I go to shul on the first day of Passover, before my rabbi days, when I had to give the sermons, I used to hear rabbis give sermons about that story all the time. Are you with us or against us? Are you our enemy? No, I'm the captain of the Lord of hosts. What do you want? What can I do for you? Joshua says. And first thing is, remember you're standing on holy ground. Anyway, have a wonderful Passover, and a little bit about the haftarah for the first day.